So clean and unclean is something that is extremely important, and as Hebrews, we have to be mindful of that. We have to be mindful of that particular, issue. Make sure that we are not praying when we are unclean. Make sure we're not touching the Bible when we are unclean. And you can look at Leviticus chapter 12. Leviticus chapter 12 and see what it says in terms of touching anything that is holy. Whenever you are unclean, whether you give birth to a child or you are in your monthly period, you are unclean for 7 days. And you don't touch anything that is holy or come into the tabernacle within that period. So that's why you see some sisters, they don't come in here when they are on their period. That's the right thing to do because Yah said so. That's part of the law. The law is not just about fringes and Sabbath and clean food. These are all part of the law. So, and we have to be very mindful. When a man is, like as I said, when a man touches a dead body and stuff like that. Let's go to Numbers chapter. Okay, are we getting ahead of ourselves? Well, okay, let's just look at this scripture and then we'll go ahead and start our new moon worship. Numbers 19. Numbers chapter 19. Every man should know about this. This applies to men. Because most of the time, whenever we talk about clean and unclean, we're talking about women. But it also applies to men. So Numbers chapter 19. Numbers chapter 19. Let's start from verse 14. I will advise you to actually read from verse 1, but from verse 1 apply mostly to the priests, but at least it's good to know what Yah says there. This is a process that the way we prepare what we usually use for cleansing. So, but it's mainly for the priests. But from verse 14 is the area that applies to men, to us. Okay, so Numbers chapter 19 from verse 14. This is the law. When someone dies in a tent or a house, everyone who comes into the tent and everyone who is in the tent shall be unclean for 7 days. Like some time ago, somebody died in my house. And I wasn't in the house at that time. If I was there when that happened, you will most likely not see me here for like a week. Because I was going to be unclean for 7 days. So I won't be here. I will want to be here, but I won't. Because I would be unclean. Because I would be in the house when he died. So, Numbers chapter 19 verse 4. This is the law. When someone dies in a tent, everyone who comes into the tent and everyone who is in the tent shall be unclean for 7 days. Shall be unclean 7 days. Verse 15, Numbers chapter 19:15. And every open vessel with no cover fastened on it is unclean. Verse 16, whoever in the open field touches one who has been killed by a sword or has died naturally, or a human bone or a grave shall be unclean 7 days. Just like a woman who is in her period, that man that touches a grave, human bone, dead body, you are unclean for 7 days. Verse 17, Numbers 19:17. For the unclean, they shall take some ashes of the burnt purification offering, and running water shall be added in a vessel. Then a clean person shall take a hyssop, dip it in the water, and sprinkle it on the tent and all the furnishings on the person who were there, and on whoever touched the bone, the slain, the corpse, or the grave. Verse 19, Numbers 19:19. Then the clean person shall sprinkle verse 19, the clean person shall sprinkle the unclean person on the 3rd day and on the 7th day, thou purifying them on the 7th day. Then they shall wash their clothes and bathe themselves in water, and at evening they shall be clean. Verse 20, anyone who are unclean but do not purify themselves, those persons shall be cut off from the assembly, for they have defiled the sanctuary of Yah, since the water of purification, water of cleansing has not been dashed on them. They are unclean. Verse 21, it shall be a perpetual statute for them. Verse 21, Numbers 19:21, it shall be a perpetual, forever statutes for them. The one who sprinkles the water for cleansing shall wash his clothes, and whoever touches the water for cleansing shall be unclean until evening. Verse 22, and whoever the unclean person touches shall be unclean, and anyone who touches it shall be unclean until evening. So these are stuff that we ignore, and on Sunday we go to church, like as I said, women with blood on them, men with sometimes semen or sperm in their pants. They go to church and they stand there waving their hands. We love Jesus, we love God, while you're filthy. And you see Christians taking dead body into a church. They take their dead bodies into the church. That's an abomination. You cannot take a dead body into the house of Yah. Wow. You cannot do that. That's an abomination. People who are around the dead body are unclean. If they are in the room where somebody dies, you cannot take a dead body. Anybody that knows the law knows that you cannot do that. Simply touching a dead body makes you unclean. And you're going to take it into the house of Yah? Are you kidding me? You know, I pray for for a time that I will be able to invite you to come and you see what the house of Yah looks like. Like the lady that called last night when I was on YouTube, talking about how the restriction that we have, you haven't even seen restriction yet, because there's a way that the house of Yah is supposed to be conducted. There's a way that the affairs of Yah are supposed to be conducted. So you cannot come in there when you are unclean. And you have to conduct yourself at a certain, you have to have certain manners and certain behavior. And failure to do that will result to you being thrown out. Because we will not be able to afford not to have the spirit of Yah because of you. Because the spirit of Yah don't care. He will leave us. Just like you had one man, an Israelite. Yah told him to go do something. Everything was fine. Everybody was conducting themselves the right way. He decided to steal something, to take something that Yah told him not to take. That was one man. One man did this, but the spirit of Yah left the whole Israelite. One man took those Babylonian garments and the money that he stole. Just one man. But the spirit of Yah left the whole congregation for what one man did in secret. This is not like the whole congregation knew about it and they kept quiet. It wasn't like that. They didn't know, but the spirit of Yah still left them. So when you come to an environment where Yah is truly being worshipped, you don't have to be, you can see the difference yourself. When you come into that sanctuary, you can feel something different. Because when you make it holy, it will be holy. Yah will, when you set it apart, Yah will approve of that. When you set it apart, Yah will approve of that. You'll be setting it apart. But when you don't care, when you don't care and you just, when you have the attitude that Yah will understand. I know he said this, I know he said that, but I'm going to do it this way, and he will understand. Once we have the attitude that Yah will understand, and we are not making effort to be holy, to set things apart, then Yah will not set that thing apart. And there's a lot of benefits. There is a lot of benefits when the spirit of Yah is with us. Because somebody can get up in the congregation. Someone can get up and go touch somebody who is sick and they will be healed. Right there. Right there. They will be healed. Anybody can get up in the congregation and touch someone and they will be healed. And sometimes Yah will begin to do wonders through somebody in the congregation. But everybody in that congregation has to be at a certain level spiritually. And when you are at that level, you are typically considered by the outside world as being mentally ill. People will consider you crazy. There's like 90% chance that people will think you're crazy. The closer you get to the Most High, the farther away you go from the world. That's how it works. See, Adam and Eve broke the law. They were kicked out into the world. You and I live in the world right now. We're supposed to go back to our Heavenly Father. So the closer we get back to Him, we're supposed to go back. We are supposed to go back. Notice that the world is moving forward. The world keep moving forward away from Yah. So 20 years ago, people was uncomfortable with homosexuality. Now, people are uncomfortable with you if you say something against homosexuals. Some time ago, a relative of mine asked me, who are you going to vote for? And I said, well, I'm not going to vote for this particular person because they support gay people. And she was like, what? That's hate. That is hate. What you just say right now is hate. You are hating. You mean you're not going to vote for this person because they support homosexuals? That's hate. That is hate. That's what she kept saying. I said, do you have Bible around here or something? Do you guys have Bible? So they went and brought the Bible. I told her to go to Romans chapter 1. So she went to Romans chapter 1. I told her to go all the way down. And then start reading. And she started reading. And she was a little bit, you can tell that she has never read that before. And that was where Paul was speaking against gay people. I said, well, I guess if I am a I'm a hateful person because I say I'm not going to vote for somebody because they support homosexuals. So that makes me a hateful person. That I'm a hateful person. If I present what the Bible shows in 1 Corinthians chapter 7 verse 36, that makes me a pervert who promotes child abuse, who promotes people marrying little girls. That makes me a pervert. If I present the fact that Yah said that we shouldn't marry Gentiles and the Gentiles shouldn't marry us, that makes me a hater of white people, a racist. If I present that Yah is going to destroy the Europeans because they are the Gentiles and they refuse to keep his laws, and actually, by the way, anyone that refuses to keep the law, Yah will destroy them, that makes me a terrorist. You see how this thing goes? So a lot of people know this. They just keep quiet. They don't want to say anything. They don't want to say anything because they don't want the heat. Well, bring on your heat. And my prayer is back to sender. So she read Romans chapter 1, and she saw that apparently Paul was also a hater. And this person was a Christian, supposed to be a Christian. So she read and saw that Paul, according to her interpretation, so you speak against homosexuals, you are a hater. He read and she saw that Paul was also a hater. And Christ was also a hater. So Christ hates people and Paul hates people. So when you decide to start following the scriptures, you have to be prepared. And this person was a relative. This person was a relative of mine. That particular encounter turned me off. Of that particular conversation went into other things like Sabbath. Eventually, she told me that she would never stop going to church on Sunday. That she was born into going to church on Sunday, and she will never stop going to church on Sunday. So there are things that we are missing. If you are going to so that's basically we keep going away from the Most High, and this is just the beginning. This is just the beginning. You know, they used to consider gay people to be mentally ill. I'm telling you, within your lifetime, in not too long, very soon, anybody who thinks of anything wrong about gay people will be considered as having mentally ill. It's already beginning to happen. If you say something against them, people are looking at you like, are you crazy? Like you must be mentally ill. So gay people used to be mentally ill. Now it's people who are saying something against them. If you hate their lifestyle, something is wrong with you. So we keep going further and further and further away from the Most High. When you look at Jeremiah chapter 6, verse 16 to verse 22. Jeremiah chapter 6, verse 16 to 22. You see that our Heavenly Father is calling us to go back to the old ways. Our Heavenly Father is telling us to go back and learn the way that our ancestors used to do things and do it that way. And He also mentioned His laws. That has to do with His laws. Jeremiah chapter 6. From verse 16 to 22. Jeremiah 6, 16 to 22. Thou says, yeah, stand at the crossroad and look and ask for the ancient paths. And where the good way lies, and walk in it, and find rest for your souls. This is the word of the Most High. He says, stand at the crossroad and look and ask for the ancient path, where good way lies, and walk in it, and find rest for your soul. Okay, so I was talking about women being unclean during their period, and a man that is their husband. So say, for example, if I have to do this on a new moon day and on a Sabbath day and on once a week for the Bible law school, plus all the other encounters I have with people, and I have a wife and she's unclean, and my daughter is also sometimes unclean, that's going to be very stressful. It will be very extremely stressful on all of us. Very stressful. I'm not going to lock them inside a room. I'm not going to push them inside a room and lock them in there because they are unclean. It will be very stressful on us. It will be stressful on them, and it will be stressful on me. And like as I said, the easiest way out will be for me to convince myself, Yah will understand. He will understand that, that will be the easiest way out. Is that the right way out? No. So at the end of the day, all of us will be stressed out. Why? Because we're doing it the modern way. It is much more difficult. It stresses everybody out. And somebody has to compromise. At the end of the day, I'm going to have to compromise and try to water down the requirements with my own imaginations by thinking that, yeah, I know that Yah said that, but I think he will understand. Or I will just cancel everything for that week. I just cancel everything. Or I will leave the house for that one week. I will leave the house for the whole week. It's still going to be stressful on us because that 1 week I'm not going to be there. So either they are out or I'm out. But that's not the way our ancestors did it. I told you about Jubilees chapter 33 with Jacob and his family. So even if I do go out for that 1 week, am I gonna not eat for that 1 week? Or am I gonna go buy food in the restaurant? You can handle it, you can deal with it, but the point is that it's gonna be complicated, and people are gonna be stressed out. And what Yah is telling us here in Jeremiah chapter 6, from verse 16, is to go back to the old ways. Not just on this issue, on everything. Whether you're raising your kids, it doesn't matter. Because if you raise them the way that the ancient people did it according to Yah's law, you will have rest for your soul. So your kids are going to grow up knowing fully well that I need to get my life together because my mom, my dad is getting old and I have to take care of them. It's my responsibility to take care of them. Your children will know this and know that, it's their job to take care of you. And at that point, you are the one that benefits. You don't have to be 60 years old and be worrying about your rent or your mortgage. Jeremiah chapter 6 verse 16. Jeremiah 6:16. That says, stand at the crossroad and look and ask for the ancient path where the good way lies, and walk in it and find rest for your souls. But they say, we will not walk in it. This is our attitude today. This is our attitude. We have said we don't want to deal with the ancient path. Those are like ancient stuff. Those are like, no, I'm not doing that. We're living in the 21st century. We're living in a modern world. This is modernism, new millennium. And we're eating chemicals, drinking chemicals. We're literally wasting away because we're now using chemicals as our medicine in the name of 21st century. We abandoned the way that our ancestors used to cure themselves with herbs. We abandoned the kind of food that our ancestors used to eat. We abandoned it and we're going for packaged food, canned and tinned tomatoes, things that has been preserved, things that has been preserved and processed. We're going for those things, refusing to eat the way our ancestors used to eat. There are consequences. We don't have rest for our soul right now. We don't. You begin to have rest for your soul when you begin to go back to the old ways. When you begin to go back to the old ways, people are going to think that you're crazy. People are going to mock you. People are going to laugh at you. Family members will begin to accuse you that you are a danger to your children because you don't want your children to go to school. You don't want your children to do this. Why are you making your young son to get married? Why are you making your young daughter to get married? Your family members are going to be your greatest enemy. Just like Yeshua said in Matthew chapter 10 from verse 34. Matthew 10 from verse 34. Your greatest enemies are going to be those of your household. If you live in a Western country, your family members will most likely start thinking of ways to take your kids away from you. Just because you're trying to follow the old ways, which your God tells you to. But the thing is that we have so many problems following the new way. The new way is not working. More than 50% of marriages in America ends in divorce. The children are the ones that suffers because kids are growing up in a house without a dad. More than 50% of the marriage ends up in divorce. That is a failed system. The foods are laden with chemicals. That is a failed system. The water has fluoride and chlorine. That is a failed system. Children don't know the Most High, but they are educated, but they don't know the Most High. They don't have any skill, but they have a degree. So they cannot survive without having to go work for somebody. That is a failed system. That is a failed way. And yet, that is the way that we've chosen to travel on. The medical system are no longer healing you with herbs, with natural herbs that actually works. Now we're using chemicals. That is a failed system. It's not working. Why is it that I keep using America as an example. Why is it that there's so many sick people in America? With all this technology. Think about that. Why are there so many sick people? So many. It's unbelievable. There is a little secret out there. It's a secret because they don't want to publicize it, but it's true. According to the US government, in America, more people die in the hands of physicians than in any other place. Both in car accident and gun death, there's a lot more people that die because they went to the hospital than in any other place. I don't know if you understand what that means. Meaning that the cause of death, of most death in America, is as a result of people going to the hospital. That's how they die. That is a failed system. So we abandon the way that Yah wants us to heal ourselves with herbs that works, has no, you take it, it's one with your body. We abandon it for chemicals. Pay attention to those drug commercials on radio and TV. Pay attention to the commercials. At the end of the commercial, the advertisement, they begin to tell you the side effects. This drug can cause diarrhea. It can cause heart failure. It can cause this kidney disease. It can cause this. And sometimes they will tell you that that drug may even cause death. Why would I want to take a drug like that? So I have one problem. But I'm going to take a drug that will cause all these things and may even cause death. Who wants to take a drug like that? This is Satan mocking you. Like Satan is actually laughing at you when they place those ads. That someone will be so stupid to go take something like that. So what do you do? What do? You start maintaining your health so that you don't even have to need those drugs. Start maintaining your health by watching what you eat. Stay away from chemical. Stay away from man-made food. If man made it, don't eat it. Stick to natural things. Stick to things that are natural. Buy it from the store, prepare it yourself, and eat it. This is how you maintain your health and begin to look at natural ways of healing yourself. That's how you avoid it. So we are in such a mess today because we keep on ignoring the fact that we have to go back to the old ways. We have to. The Most High is calling us to go back to the old ways. So according to verse 16, we say that we don't want to walk in the old ways. This is clearly our attitude today. This is clearly the attitude that we have today. Verse 17. Verse 17, Jeremiah chapter 6, verse 17. Also, I raised up sentinels for you. Give heed to the sound of the trumpet. But they say, we will not give heed. So Yah said that he raised up people to warn you. He raised up people to warn his people. So verse 16, he's calling us to go back to the old ways. We say no. He said in verse 17 that he even raised up some people to sound the alarm, warning us to go back to the old ways. We still don't want to listen. The old ways are basically following the law, eating the way he wants us to eat, dressing the way he wants us to dress, raising our children the way he wants us to raise our children, worshiping the way he wants us to worship. At the end of the day, Yah has nothing to get benefit from these things. He was only telling us this because these are the right way. You raise your children the way he told you to raise your children. When your children get older, they take care of you. What in the world does Yah have to give any benefit from that? You raise your children the way that Yah wants you to raise your children. Your children know that they cannot curse you. They know they cannot lay their hands on you. They know that they cannot finish paying you back for what you did for them. So what in the world does our Heavenly Father has to gain from that? We are the one that benefits. We eat the way that he wants us to eat. What in the world does Yah have to benefit from that? We are the one that benefits because those foods are natural. It doesn't cause disease. This is all for our own good. But we say no, and that's why we're suffering. So he said that he raised up, basically sentinels for you. Give you heed to the sound of the trumpet. But they said no. But they say, we will not give heed. So Yah says, all right. In verse 18, he says, therefore, hear, O nations, and know, O congregation, what will happen to them. So Yah is now calling on the nations. Now watch. Watch what will happen to my people. Because my people don't want to listen. So all you nations, I want you to watch. And you congregation, watch also. Let's now see what will happen to you. Verse 19. Hear, O earth, I am going to bring disaster on these people. I am going to bring disaster on these people. The fruit of their scheme, because they have not given heed to my words. And as for my teaching, they have rejected it. Verse 20, of what use to me is frankincense that comes from Sheba, or sweet cane from a distant land? Your burnt offering are not acceptable, nor are your sacrifices pleasing to me. Verse 21, Jeremiah chapter 6:21. Therefore, thus says Yah, see, I am laying before these people a stumbling block. I'm laying before these people a stumbling blocks against which they shall stumble. Parents and children together, neighbor and friends shall perish. This is the state that we're in today. When I see the pictures of my people, my mates, when I see them gather around the table, drinking man-made alcohol, like literally like gather around the table and they're just drinking. And when you see almost all of them, they have like big stomachs. It's like if you don't have a big stomach, it's like something is wrong with you. Are you sick? Because everybody has a big stomach. So how come you don't? That big stomach is as a result of having insulin problem. When you begin to have insulin resistance, because a lot of junk are coming in, and at some point your pancreas will begin to become angry. Why are you doing this to me? Why are you pouring all this chemical inside me? And your body will basically get angry. Your liver will begin to not function properly and begin to store those fat in your stomach. Because there's so many junk coming in. So many junk, so many sugars coming in. So your body will begin to store the fat in your stomach and in other places. At that point, you are now walking towards crossing the line for diabetes. And once you cross that line for diabetes, the next thing that comes is all the other horrible disease that appears as a result of being diabetic. Blindness, amputation, and many other other things. Just because we're eating all this chemical and drinking all these chemicals. So we are definitely, Yah have put a stumbling block on us. You see the threat that he made. He made a threat. Actually, I'm going to read that from a different translation too. Because that place where they said, my teachings, that they rejected my teachings, he actually meant his law. He meant that we rejected his law. That was the problem. Not just his teachings. That teachings is his laws. That is the problem between us and Yah right now. So, Jeremiah chapter 6 from verse 16. Jeremiah chapter 6 from verse 16. Thou says, Yah, stand in the ways and see, and ask for the old path, where the good way is, and walk in it. Then you shall find rest for your souls. But they said, we will not walk in it. Verse 17. Also, I set watchmen over you. Verse 17. Also, I set watchmen over you, saying, listen to the sound of the trumpet. But they say, we will not listen. Verse 18. Therefore hear, you nations, and know, O congregation, what is among you. Verse 19. Hear, O earth, behold, I will certainly bring calamity on these people, the fruit of their thought, because they have not heeded my words, nor my law, but rejected it. Verse 20. For what purpose to me comes frankincense from Sheba, and sweet cane from a far country? Your burnt offerings are not acceptable, nor your sacrifices sweet to me. So what we were doing and what we're still doing is basically we are ignoring the law, but then we try to offer your sacrifices. So he said, I don't care about your frankincense that you brought from Sheba. There's a lot of good frankincense that come from the land of Sheba. He said he doesn't care about the frankincense. He doesn't care about our burnt offering. Why? Because we're rejecting his law. And notice how he starts out saying that we should go back to the old ways. And then he mentions his law. Because those were the things that our ancestors followed. Our ancestors followed the law. So, speaking of clean and unclean, we read Numbers chapter 19, which is a very important place when you're trying to learn about clean and unclean. Let's also go to Leviticus chapter 15. Leviticus chapter 15. Leviticus chapter 15. We also read about clean and unclean. Leviticus chapter 15. Okay, Leviticus chapter 15. Leviticus chapter 15, it says, Thou says, Yah spoke to Moshe and Aaron, saying, Speak to the people of Israel and say to them, When any man has a discharge from his members, his discharge makes him unclean. Verse 3, The uncleanness of his discharge is this, whether his members flow with his discharge or his members is stopped from discharging. It is unclean for him. Verse 4, Every bed on which the one the one with the discharge lies shall be unclean, and everything on which he sits shall be unclean. Verse 5, Anyone who touches his bed shall wash his clothes and bathe in water and be unclean until evening. Verse 6, All who sit on anything on which the one with the discharge has sat shall wash their clothes and bathe in water and be unclean until evening. Verse 7, Leviticus 15 verse 7, All who touch the body of the one with the discharge shall wash their clothes and bathe in water and be unclean until the evening. If the one with the discharge spits on person who are unclean, then they shall wash their clothes and bathe in water and be unclean until the evening. Verse 9, Leviticus 15 verse 9, Any saddle on which the one with the discharge rides shall be unclean. All who touch anything that was under him shall be unclean until the evening, and all who carry such a thing shall wash their clothes and bathe in water and be unclean until the evening. All those whom the one with the discharge touches without his having rinsed his hand in water shall wash their clothes and bathe in water and be unclean until the evening. Verse 12, Leviticus 15 verse 12, Any earthen vessel that the one with the discharge touches shall be broken, and every vessel of wood shall be rinsed with water. Verse 13, Leviticus 15:13, When the one with discharge is cleansed of his discharge, he shall count 7 days from his cleansing. He shall wash his clothes and bathe in water and bathe in fresh water, and he shall be clean. Verse 14, On the 8th day he shall take 2 turtle doves or 2 pigeons and come before Yah to the entrance of the tent of the meeting and give them to the priest. Verse 15, Leviticus 15:15, The priest shall offer them, one for a sin offering and the other for a burnt offering, and the priest shall make atonement on his behalf before Yah for his discharge. Okay, so Leviticus chapter 15 to verse 15. Leviticus chapter 15 from verse 1 to verse 15. Leviticus chapter 15 from verse 1 to 15 is talking about a very interesting situation. That situation is not common today. It's not common. But when you look online, you're going to see men that suffered from that kind of situation. So this is a situation where blood will be coming out from a man's penis. There are men that they will see blood coming out. That's what this is talking about. It's a very rare situation. When I looked into this, I was searching online and looking around online. There was someone from India that had that situation where blood comes out from their penis, just like a blood comes out from a woman during her period. So you look at Leviticus chapter 15 from verse 1 to verse 15. Leviticus 15 verse 1 to 15. You see that the same thing that applies to a woman, when something like that happens to a woman, which is during her period, the same thing applies to the man. But again, this is a very rare case. You will most likely not ever meet a man that has blood coming out from his penis. But when that happens, he is unclean, just like a woman in her period. That's what this is talking about. This Leviticus chapter 15 from verse 1 to 15 is specifically talking about that situation, which is very rare today, where a man will just look down and see blood coming out from his penis. That's what it's talking about. But it doesn't happen that often. It's a very rare situation. But when that does occur, that man is unclean as long as that blood comes out. So what this is an equivalent of what happened to that woman in Luke chapter 8, the woman with the flow of blood. So just like she has blood coming out constantly for 12 years, you only experience it few days in a month. Few days in a month. She experienced it constantly for 12 years. It's kind of like that for the men. So when a man is seeing that blood coming out, that man is unclean. The man is unclean for that whole period. That's what this is talking about. It's worth knowing, even though it will most likely not happen to you. Now that takes us to the next level, a different situation, which starts from verse 16. Verse 16. Verse 16. Leviticus chapter 15, 16. Leviticus 15, 16. If a man has an emission of semen, he shall bathe his whole body in water and be unclean until evening. So this is different from what we read from verse 1 to verse 15. So what we read in Leviticus chapter 15, verse 1 to 15, was not talking about sperm. It was talking about blood. It's not talking about sperm. It's talking about blood. So in verse 16, verse 15, from verse 16, it begins to talk about blood. When a man, begins to talk about sperm. Verse 15, verse 1 to verse 15 talks about blood coming out from a man. That is a very rare situation. It does happen, but you hardly hear about something like that. I would like to think that it actually happens a lot, but people don't report it. People are just embarrassed to say that blood is coming out from their penis. So there's a very little information out there, but I'm sure that men do go through stuff like that, but they wouldn't say it out. Okay. So So we're going to continue from verse 16, because verse 16 begins to talk about sperm. And this is most likely going to happen to young men. This is most likely going to happen. And these young men are most likely going to hide that from you because they are embarrassed to tell you that they are having an accident. They are seeing sperm. But any young man, if you are an adult, you remember this has pretty much happened to almost every young man at some point, because usually in the beginning you're being told, you can't have sex, but at the same time you can't get married because you haven't finished school. That's what we tell them, right? That is what we tell them. They can't have sex, but they can't get married. So what usually happens is that sometimes these boys, it's hard to see a man that this did not happen to. This has pretty much happened to almost every man when they were young. At some point, sperm will begin to come out from their body. Ready or not, here I come. So you can claim that you're not ready, you're not done with school. Your body doesn't care. Your body does not care. So it says in Leviticus chapter 15 from verse 16. We're going to continue from verse 16. Leviticus 15 from 16. 15 from verse 16. And if any man's seed of compilation go out from him, then he shall wash his flesh in water and be unclean until evening. If a man's seed is the sperm. A man's seed is the sperm. The sperm that comes out of a man. That is his seed. So it says that if a man's seed goes out from him, he shall be unclean for until evening. He shall wash himself and be unclean until evening. So again, this is something that happens a lot. If you have a young man, like as I said, it's hard to see a young man that this had not happened to. It will happen. It has also it happens. It happens. So Leviticus chapter 15 verse 16. So in order to show you that is talking about sperm, okay? Because maybe you're not sure whether is that really talking about sperm. Let's go to Genesis chapter 38. It says that when a man's seed goes out from him, when a man's seed goes out from him, he is supposed to be unclean until evening. He's supposed to be unclean until evening. He's supposed to wash himself, bathe himself in water, and be unclean until evening. As soon as that sperm goes out, it doesn't matter the reason why it came out, whether it came out as an accident or it came out intentionally or you had sex with your wife. It doesn't matter. As long as a sperm comes out from you, being a man, you are unclean until evening. Period. That is the law. So that's what it says in Leviticus chapter 15 verse 16. But I want to take you to Genesis chapter 38 so that we can see that seed. Some translation will tell you semen or sperm, but in King James it says seed. So let's go to Genesis chapter 38. So Genesis 38, we had a situation. In Genesis 38, situation where this is part of the Hebrew culture. So what we're going to do is that we're going to start from verse 1. We're going to start from verse 1, and then we get down to verse 9. We're just simply trying to find out what is the meaning of that seed. I think as we go through this right now, we will eventually actually come up with girls and their period and getting married. Yeah, it has to do with Leviticus chapter 15. So eventually we're going to get down to that. But right now, let's keep going from there. So it says, let's go to Genesis chapter 38. Genesis 38, we're simply trying to find out from the Bible, what is that seed? Is that like an orange seed or apple seed? Let's find out. Genesis 38 from verse 1. And it came to pass at that time that Yehudah went down from his brethren and turned in to a certain Adulamite, whose name was Hira. Verse 2. Genesis 38 verse 2. Yehudah saw there a daughter of a certain Canaanite, whose name was Shua, and he took her and went in unto her. And she conceived and bare a son, and he called her name Er. Verse 4. She conceived again and bare a son, and she called his name Onan. Verse 5. And yet again, and she conceived yet again, and bare a son, and called his name Shelah. And he was at Shezeb when she bare him. Verse 6. Genesis 36, chapter 38, verse 6. Genesis 38, verse 6. And Yehudah took a wife for Er, his firstborn, whose name was Tamar. Verse 7. And Er, Yehudah's firstborn, was wicked in the sight of Yah, and Yah slew him. So he was wicked in the sight of Yah, and Yah killed him. Verse 8. This is the future of all those that refuse to keep the law. And that's why I really want to keep the law. Because Yah is going to kill all those that refuse to keep the law. Because that is wickedness in the sight of the Most High. Verse 8. And Yehudah said to Onan, Go in unto thy brother's wife, and marry her, and raise up a seed to thy brother. Raise up a seed to thy brother. Verse 9. Genesis 38 verse 9. And Onan knew that the seed should not be his. And it came to pass, when he went in unto his brother's wife, that he spilled it on the ground, lest that he should give seed to his brother. Verse 10. And the thing which he did displeased Yah, wherefore he slew him. So his father told him, Go in, your brother is dead. Your brother died. So go in and take over his wife so that you can produce some seed for your brother. He never said no. He could have said, I don't want to do that. So he didn't say that. So he went in and had sex with her. And so he wanted to get the sex. He wanted to enjoy the sex, but He didn't want to impregnate her. So he himself was also wicked, just like his brother. Why wouldn't you want to produce a child for your brother? I mean, that's your brother. So if he had said no, everything would have been fine. I mean, that's not a good thing for him to say no, because that's wickedness. But at least you're rejecting the whole thing. You can't choose to have the sex, and then when it comes time to put in your seed, you pour it to the ground. And that displeased Yah, and Yah killed him. So that is seed. That is seed. That's what, the seed is what's supposed to come out from him and go into her. And eventually she herself will carry the seed. When the seed is ready, she will deliver the seed. And the seed will be the baby. And that's the seed. It all starts with the sperm. The sperm is the seed. So when he refused, after he had the sex and then poured his sperm to the ground, his seed did not go into her, and she did not conceive, thereby producing a seed for the late brother. So it has to do with the sperm. So in Leviticus chapter 15, verse 16, it says, if any man's seed of compulsion go out from him, then he shall wash his flesh in water and be unclean until the even. Verse 17, and every garment and every skin whereon is the seed of compulsion shall be washed with water and be unclean until evening. So when sperm comes out from you and touch your underwear or touch your pants, my advice is just go into a shower, take the whole thing out, wash yourself. That's it, because you have to wash everything that it touches. Everything. So this is something that is a big problem for young boys. Big problem. Even for some adults. Some adults have to struggle with this. And I will tell you where it usually happens. Happens when we see women that are half naked. Now, a lot of men will not admit this. And I'm going to tell it to you like it is, because this is true. A lot of men will not admit this. But whenever we see a woman with tight clothes, especially if we can see her nipple, or if we can see if she's wearing one of those jeans that you can actually see their butt. They're wearing a short jeans where you can see their behind. Stuff like that turns us on. And when it turns us on, what usually happens is that sometimes your seed will begin to come out. And it typically happens to men when they have not had sex in a long time. That's when it happens. So in that case, when that happens, you are unclean. You have to go home before the sun goes down, wash yourself, and wash that clothes, and you're fine. When it comes to all of this, we're going to get to the women in this chapter, Leviticus 15. We're going to get to the women. And like I always say whenever I present this, the problem is not being unclean. Being unclean is not the problem. It's bound to happen. There's nothing, when it comes for the women. So when you are unclean as a woman, you're not committing any sin. The problem begins when you refuse to do certain things. When you don't acknowledge that you are unclean. Oh, that's when the problem begins. That's when you turn it into a sin. But if you are unclean and you acknowledge that you're unclean, you refuse to touch anything that is holy, you refuse to pray, you don't, you conduct yourself and you just acknowledge that you're unclean, that's fine. It becomes a crime or a sin when you just ignore that you are unclean. You're grabbing the Bible and reading the Bible and calling on Yah and reading the Bible and going into the congregation with blood all over you and stuff like that. That's when it becomes a problem. Because then now you're being defiant. You're defying the Most High at this point. So young men do have this problem. Not just young men, but it happens a lot with young men. They do have accidents. So the best thing to do is to, like as I said, try and get home, wash yourself, and because of the way the Most High designed your body, because of the way He designed your body, biblically, according to the Hebrew culture, this is the reason why we betrothed a young girl to our son. And this thing from Leviticus chapter 15 is going to lead us back to 1 Corinthians chapter 7. Because in order for you to understand 1 Corinthians chapter 7, you have to understand Leviticus chapter 15. That's why I always tell you, whenever I quote 1 Corinthians chapter 7 verse 36, that talks about if she has seen the flower of her age, let her marry. I always tell you to go and read Leviticus chapter 15. Because if you don't understand this chapter that we're reading right now, you will not understand what Paul was talking about. So, in order to avoid these things for young boys, what we do is that a girl, typically, we all know each other in the congregation. I'm talking about back in the day, in our culture. Families all know each other. Some people have boys, some people have girls. So we worship in the same place. We all know each other. So what we do is that, it's easy to simply, everybody has a need. This parent has a boy that needs a wife, obviously. This parent has a girl that needs a husband. And so that's how it works. And and boys, a wife is betrothed to them at a young age. There's nothing like being single like that, the way you see in the world right now. And you can go and read Deuteronomy chapter 22. If you read Deuteronomy chapter 22, you see that almost all young girls are betrothed. Like, they are betrothed. And if she's not betrothed and you have sex with her, then she's your wife. If she's betrothed and you have sex with her, then you are going to die because you just had sex with somebody's wife. So it's very important to read Deuteronomy chapter 22. Deuteronomy 22 to get more information on that. So, in order to prevent this, if I have a son that is young, arrangement is, even when you're pregnant, when you have your son, you are already thinking, you're beginning to think, right now, if I have to find a wife for my son, where do I do that? Like, how do I do that? Who is it going to be? These are things that you begin to think ahead of time. So sometimes things will go well for people. They will easily find people to betroth to their son. So what happens is that there is something that happens to the boy psychologically. Because every young boy wants sex. They're not going to tell you that. They won't tell you, but they want sex. They are horny. So what happens is that because he is desiring that, but he also knows that he needs to get done with his career. He knows that he needs to get done with his, he needs to start having income. He, the boy, doesn't really want to depend on you to be feeding them. Because as a young boy, he wants to kind of, he wants to, he's thinking that if he is the one making the money, that will give him some autonomy. Because as a young boy, there are certain restrictions that you put on him. There are certain restrictions that you put on him that he doesn't like. But because he lives in your house and is eating your food, he is thinking that if he could get his own money, that will allow him to have some autonomy. Okay? So I remember when I was younger, I wanted to kind of, go find my own place. And my mother, basically, that did not work out. But as a young man, you want to start making your own money. It doesn't mean that you hate your mom or you hate your dad. You don't hate them. Just that, at sometimes there are certain things that they tell you to do that you don't really want to do. Or you do it because you have no choice. So one of the things that a young man wants to do is to start making his own money. So at the same time, he also has a young girl that is betrothed to him. But he knows that, I can't really depend on my mom to be feeding us or my dad. So, and I really want this girl. So that pushes him to be serious. It pushes him to be responsible because he has a wife waiting for him. A wife is literally waiting for him to get his life together. So that pushes boys a lot. In my culture, typically, when a boy is irresponsible, when a boy drinks, chases after women, just like a nuisance to the village, what is done is that the family will basically like marry a wife for him. I know that sounds crazy, but the family members will actually marry a wife for him. They will call him and sit him down and be like, we're going to get you a wife. And then they will begin to work on it. They will find a woman or a girl and basically tell them, hey, go talk to her. Go, this is your wife. So most of the time, the boy, he doesn't really want that, but he wants the sex. So he doesn't want the idea that he doesn't want that responsibility. He does not want that responsibility, but he wants the sex. So that becomes like a bait. So most of the time they don't say no. But what happens is that initially he doesn't like the girl because he wasn't the one that found the girl. But eventually he begins to build up feelings for her. But that does change boys dramatically. It really does turn things around. It makes them become responsible. So this boy that used to go out and come back at 2 a.m., go out drinking, smoking weed and hanging out with other irresponsible boys, all of a sudden, by 9, 10, sometimes 8, he's going home because he knows that his wife is home. He wants to go be with his wife. And all of a sudden, you no longer have to push him to go get a job. You don't have to push him anymore because now he has a responsibility. So typically, the parents don't have to say much anymore because here he has a wife now. And what usually happens within the first year, she becomes pregnant. And that is even more pressure on him to get his life together quickly. So what usually happens is that he will most likely go find a job. So in the daytime, he goes to work. In the evening, he comes back home, he's tired, he eats, and he goes, he stays with his wife. So it works like a miracle in our culture. It really works. So a wife will get a man to become responsible because now he has responsibility. So all of a sudden, this boy that used to hang out goes around chasing around girls and smoking weed and coming back home late at night. All of a sudden, he has a job now. Not because he wants to, but because he has to. There's a baby on the way. So he has to do these things. So it really does change them. So, but as a very young boy, at the age of 12, 13, 14, to you're calling them like babies. That's what you call them. But that's your 13 years old baby can impregnate a woman. So I don't know why you call them a baby. Because boys 12 years old can impregnate a woman, 13 years old. It does happen. You can go on YouTube and look. Go on YouTube and look and you see documentations. So at that age, he's not really a baby. And you are not doing him any favor or yourself by giving them impression that they are still a baby. That is actually a very bad idea. That's a satanic idea. You should be encouraging, you should be letting your boys know that they are no longer babies. In our culture, we want them to become responsible at a very young age because it keeps them away from trouble. He doesn't have time to be playing video games, time to be goofing around, playing around, because you're teaching him that he has responsibilities. Well, when you are following after the Gentiles and you are doing exactly what they want you to do by giving him impression that he's a baby, he's going to act like baby. If you're giving him impression that he's a child, he will act like a child. How can he be responsible when you are not pushing him into responsibilities? How? So these are all the nonsense we've learned from the Europeans. Calling a boy who is biologically capable of impregnating a woman, you're calling him a little boy. Calling a girl who can safely carry a baby and deliver a baby, you're calling him a little baby. I guess the Most High made some mistakes in those areas. How can he make them to be capable of doing these things when they're still a baby? So these are all the words that these people are using, and they're tricking us with those words. See, you don't understand that they have an agenda. You have to understand that these people have an agenda, and you have to understand that they're being pushed by something. These Gentiles are being pushed. The things that they do, the things that they say, these are all spiritual. The things that they pursue, the things that they promote it because Yah don't want it. These are things that Satan wants. That's why they promote those things. That's why you have to be skeptical about anything that comes from them. Because typically, if they are telling you that something is white, it's typically black. If they say it's black, it's typically white. So if you see them promoting certain, if they start telling you that boys should get married at a young age, that's a red flag. Go and check. Most likely, Yah wants boys to get married at an older age. If they tell you that boys should get married after college, it's most likely, watch them. You will, if you begin to really take the law seriously and you begin to compare the things that they do with the law, you begin to see a pattern. They promote the things that Yah condemns. And the things that Yah wants us to do, they condemn. So the idea that your son is a little boy, that may sound nice. That may make you feel good. That may make you feel connected. But what you don't realize is that you're actually putting your child at a disadvantage. Because a boy that thinks that he's a child will act like a child. I'm not sure that you want your child to be your son to be acting like a child. You want your son, regardless of their age, you want them to begin to act like an adult. An adult is not goofing around, playing around and wasting time on video game. Because an adult has a responsibility. So you want your child to be acting like an adult. If you give them impression that they are a baby, they're going to act like babies. Babies are not serious. Babies don't believe that they have responsibility. Babies act like spoiled brat. You have to provide for a baby. You have to always be giving them. And if you don't give them, they start crying. Is that what you want from your son? Or you want a son to be a man? Because real men don't waste time on video games. Real men don't waste time goofing around, playing around. Real men don't waste time smoking weed. Real men don't waste time chasing after girls. Real men are thinking about their future. Real men are thinking about, how do I have a skill and start my own business? These are stuff that real men spend time thinking about. And that's what the Hebrew boys should be thinking about. I have to get married, but I want to make my own money. How do I do that? You're supposed to be giving your child an impression of who he's supposed to be. He's not supposed to be a little boy, because he's not. Let him touch a girl and that girl will become pregnant. And that will prove to you that he's not a little boy. So these are all the stuff that we've learned from these people, and it ends us keeping us down. These mentalities keep us down. It keeps our sons down. Keeps our children down. You see people in their 20s. They have no idea what they want to be when they grow up. They are like 20 years old. He's still doing girlfriends. At 20, he should have like 3 kids already. So today, we follow this mentality that they have to finish college before they really start doing things. You see people in their 20s, they don't know what they're doing. Same thing with your daughters, girls, same thing. So because we are in Leviticus chapter 15, and we're dealing with this particular verse 16, we're going to continue, and then we get to the verse that deals with girls, and then we focus on girls. Tell me who benefits when you instill proper teachings to your children. You are the one that benefits. All these relatives that think you're crazy, at the end of the day, we shall find out who is really crazy. Because at the age of 20, 21, there are sons that are still coming out of university looking for a job. Their daughters are still coming out of university looking for work. When your own children are having their own children, and having their own career. So you are the one that benefits. Leviticus chapter 15, Verse 16. If any man's okay, actually I went through that. And any garment, verse 17. And every garment and every skin wherein is the seed of compulsion shall be washed with water and be unclean until evening. So when a sperm comes out from a boy or a man, whether intentionally or unintentionally, if it touches in your clothes, you have to also wash that cloth as you wash yourself. And you will be unclean until that particular evening. When you wash your clothes, that's fine. Your clothes is fine. Once you wash it, oh yeah. How do you wash yourself? With running water. Very important. I have to add that in. You have to wash yourself with running water. What does that mean? It means that you go into a shower. It's good if you have those shower, the one that water comes from your head and just washes down. That's running water. So whenever you are unclean and you want to wash yourself, you have to wash yourself in a running water. That means that you cannot go into a bathtub and wash yourself. You cannot wash yourself in a place where you're washing yourself and the water stays there and you're in that water. You're still unclean. So you want to wash yourself, either you're using a bucket and you're taking the water and you're pouring it on yourself. You can do that too. That's running water. So you can use a bucket and pour the water on yourself, and then you put your soap all around you and wash yourself, and then take your wash your, that's how we used to do it. Back in the day, that's how we used to do it. But now we use like shower. Shower is good too. You can just turn on the shower and water is pouring on your face or pouring on your body, but it's running water. It's running down your body. That's how you clean yourself when you're unclean. Okay. So verse 19 goes in for the women. We've dealt with the men, from verse 1 to verse 18, verse 1 to verse 17 deals with men. So now from verse 19, we're going to get down to for the issue for uncleanliness for the women. All right, Leviticus chapter 15 from verse 19. Leviticus chapter 15 from verse 19. It says, and if a woman has an issue, and her issue in her flesh be blood, she shall be put apart 7 days, and whosoever toucheth her shall be unclean until evening. Leviticus chapter 15 verse 19. And if a woman has an issue, and her issue in her flesh be blood, if it's blood, she shall be put apart for 7 days, and whoever toucheth her shall be unclean until evening. So that's what I was saying. Like, if my wife becomes unclean, we have a problem, because I cannot do the things of Yah, because she's unclean. I will not be able to really do much. So that's why typically Hebrew men, that's one of and the women understood this too. They don't want that stress. Like, they have to take care of the kids and cook for the husband and all that. So that's why they themselves want a sister wife. So typically when this person is unclean, the other person is handling the whole situation, cooking and doing all that, while the woman that was unclean is unclean for 7 days. Her kids are being taken care of by the other sister. And their husband too. So as you see in verse 19 here, she shall be put apart for 7 days. So whenever you are in your period, you are unclean for 7 days. Okay, so let me slow down a little bit and deal with this. So let's say this evening, this evening, you begin to see your period, that means that you're going to be unclean until next 7 days from today. So you have to always count 7 days from the first time you saw that blood. Now, you may stop seeing the blood after 3 days. You may stop seeing the blood after 4 days or after 5 days, and you don't see any more blood. You are still unclean. So 7 days is the mark that was put there. 7 days. You are unclean until 7 days. The reason why the Yah put it that way is that if that number of days are not there, if you simply say that people are unclean when they see their period, and when they no longer see it, they are no longer unclean, it's going to be very, very complicated for some people. Because some people may start seeing the blood, and then all of a sudden they don't see it anymore, and then they assume that they are no longer unclean. It's just so that says 7 days. In most cases, you will, after a couple of days, you stop seeing it, but you're still unclean until after 7 days. And it says that whoever touches you becomes unclean. Leviticus 15:19. And if a woman has an issue, and her issue in her flesh be blood, she shall be put apart 7 days, and whosoever toucheth her shall be unclean until evening. Verse 20. And everything that she lieth upon in her separation shall be unclean, and everything also that she sitteth upon shall be unclean. So the bed that she lies on, the seat that she sits on, shall be unclean. Verse 21. And whosoever toucheth her bed shall wash his clothes and bathe himself in water and be unclean until evening. So if you live in a house with a man and you are in your period, he's gonna be it's basically impossible for him not to become unclean. It's close to impossible for him not to be unclean. Because if he touches your bed, if he touches you, like we see in verse 19, and whosoever, in verse 19, and whosoever toucheth her shall be unclean. So how do you avoid your husband? Eventually he's going to be unclean. So basically for all those days you are unclean, he is unclean. That means that you can pray, he can pray. He can also not pray. He is not supposed to touch anything that is holy. He cannot pray to the Most High because he's unclean. So for a regular man, that could be fine. For a man that deals with the things of the Most High, that could be a problem. And that's why the Hebrew men do have those houses that I told you, so that their wife usually lives next to the main house. When they have to sleep together, she can come to the main house, but she stays with her children in the other house. Okay, so it says in verse 20, and everything that she lieth upon in her separation shall be unclean. Everything also that she sitteth upon shall be unclean. Verse 21, and whosoever toucheth her bed shall wash his clothes and bathe himself in water and be unclean until even. So if you look at verse 21, verse 21, you will notice that this is primarily applies to the men, the husbands of these women. Like as I said, being unclean is not a sin. But when you are unclean and you refuse to wash yourself, and you go ahead and touch something that is holy, and you enter into the tabernacle, that's when it becomes a sin. Because then now you're defying the Most High. But if you are unclean and you wash yourself and you do what you're supposed to do, that's not sin. There's no sin in that. So you look at verse 21, you see that this verse 21, you can clearly tell that this applies to the men. Because it says, and whosoever toucheth her bed shall wash his clothes and bathe himself in water and be unclean until even. So this is pretty much basically a situation that the man has to be in for that 7 days. Verse 22, and whosoever toucheth anything that she sat upon shall wash his clothes and bathe himself in water and be unclean until the evening. Verse 23, and if it be on her bed or on anything wherein she sitteth, when he toucheth it, he shall be unclean until evening. Still talking about the man. Any man that touches anything that she touches shall be unclean. Verse 24, and if any man lie with her at all, and her flowers be upon him, he shall be unclean 7 days, and all the bed wherein he lieth shall be unclean. So this is now where we have the connection with 1 Corinthians chapter 7. So it says in verse 24, Leviticus 15:24, and if any man lies with her at all, and her flowers be upon him, he shall be unclean for 7 days. He shall be unclean 7 days. So what is this flower that will touch this man? If a man, in verse 24, Leviticus chapter 15:24, if a man has sex with his wife when she's in her period, and her flowers touches this man, he shall be unclean for 7 days. It says, if her flower. So I'm going to leave that and I will continue, because we're going to see that word again as we get down to the end. We'll see that word flower again, and then we'll come back up and find out what it means. So it says in verse 25, Leviticus 15:25, and if a woman have an issue of her blood many days out of the time of her separation, or if it runs beyond the time of her separation, all the days of the issue of her uncleanness shall be as the days of her separation. She shall be unclean. Verse 26, every bed wherein she lieth all the days of her issue shall be unto her as the bed of her separation, and whosoever she seated, and whatsoever she seated upon shall be unclean as the uncleanness of her separation. Verse 27, and whosoever toucheth those things shall be unclean, and shall wash his clothes and bathe himself in water and be unclean until the evening. So, verse 28, but if she be cleansed of her issue, then she shall number to herself 7 days, and after that she shall be clean. Verse 29, and on the 8th day she shall take unto her 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons, and bring them unto the priest to the door of the tabernacle of the congregation. Verse 30, and the priest shall offer the one for a sin offering and the other for a burnt offering, and the priest shall make an atonement for her before Yah for the issue of her uncleanness. So this particular area right now, is talking about if her uncleanness goes beyond, if it goes like from verse 25, typically you are unclean for a couple of days. You're typically unclean for a few days, 3 days, 4 days, 5 days. So it says that if Leviticus chapter 15:25 says that if her uncleanliness goes beyond the normal period of time, the normal period of time will be whatever days that it goes in for you, maybe like 3 days, 4 days, 5 days. But once it passes 7 days, once it goes beyond 7 days, then, like it says in verse 25, and if a woman have an issue of her blood many days out of the time of her separation. What is the time of her separation? 7 days. Time of her separation is 7 days. That's when she separates from people. So if a woman has an issue of her blood many days out of the time of her separation, which is 7 days, or if it runs beyond the time of her separation, all the days of the issue of her separation, all the days all the days of the issue of her uncleanliness shall be as the days of her separation. She shall be unclean. So it says basically, if after 7 days, you're still unclean. So after 8 days, you're still seeing blood. After 9 days, you're still seeing blood. Our Heavenly Father is saying that all those days that you're still seeing blood, you're still unclean. So this is the reason why when that woman with the issue of blood, her problem was that she was seeing her period, but then it wouldn't stop. So she kept seeing that blood for 12 years, about 12 years. It just would not stop. She was seeing her blood constantly. So that was the reason why eventually people found out and people began to avoid her. So if you read her story very well, people were avoiding her because she was unclean and she herself was staying away from people. So this is it's actually a really bad, a very sad situation, because she doesn't want to be around people, because she doesn't want to make them unclean. So until she saw that one opportunity, she knew that all these doctors could not heal me. Maybe if I touch the fringes of Yeshua, his fringes. So she decided that, Yeshua is wearing these fringes and Yah told us to wear it. If I touch the fringes, maybe Yah will forgive me. Maybe Yah will, and she did. So she slipped into a crowd in Luke chapter 8. And she basically went and touched his fringes. And when she touched his fringes, power left the body of Christ. And he began to ask, who touched me? Who touched me? I can feel that I lost some power. Who touched me right now? She only touched his fringes. So this is a situation that you see here in Leviticus chapter 15, because her issue of blood have gone beyond 7 days and was up to 12 years until she touched Yeshua's garment, his fringes. So that's what this is saying. So if you happen to, your period happened to go beyond 7 days, our Heavenly Father is simply saying that you are still unclean, just like you are within that 7 days. As long as you keep seeing that period, you're still unclean. Now, okay, before I get to, maybe I should deal with this before I get to the end, because the question that comes up is, how do you do it since we don't have the temple? Because according to Numbers chapter 19, you're supposed to, use the water of purification to purify yourself. So what do we do now that we don't have the temple? How do you handle it? How do you get to obey this commandment? How does that work? What can you do? So this is where, so what we do is that, we Before I get to that, let me finish the chapter, because I still have a couple of verses left. Okay, I have verse 31 to 33. So I'm going to finish it, and this is going to take us to First Corinthians, because of that word flower that will come up again. And then then we get to, how do you handle it today? How do you deal with this issue of clean and unclean, which is unavoidable? So let's complete this chapter 15. We started from verse 1, and we have three verses left. So it says in verse 31, Leviticus chapter 15, 31, thou shalt ye separate the children of Israel from their uncleanness, that they die not in their uncleanness when they defile my tabernacle that is among them. Verse 32, this is the law of him that had an issue, and of him whose seed goeth from him, whose sperm goeth from him, and is defiled therein. Verse 33, so everything we just read is a law that applies to any man that blood is coming out from his penis, or any man that sperm is coming out from his penis, or each time sperm comes out. This is a law that regulates that. Verse 33, and of her that is sick of her flowers. So verse 31, actually verse 32, this is the law of him that had an issue, and of him whose seed goeth from him, and is defiled therein. Verse 33, and of her that is sick of her flowers, and of him that had an issue, of the man and of the woman, and of him that lieth with her that is unclean. And that is the end of the chapter. So if you look at verse 33, it says, and of her, this is a law that applies to a woman who is sick of her flowers. Okay, let's go to that verse that we saw earlier in verse 24. Leviticus 15:24. It says that if any man lie with her at all, meaning if any man has sex with his wife, if any man lie with her at all, and her flowers be upon him, he shall be unclean for 7 days, and all the bed wherein he lieth shall be unclean. So, you know that from verse 19, that this is talking about if a woman, look at verse 19, because verse 19 tells you what that flower is. Verse 24 says that if a man lies with a woman, and the flower of that woman touches that man, if a man has sex with a woman, and the flower that comes from that woman touches that man shall be unclean. So let's go back to verse 19 and find out what that flower is. It says in verse 19, Leviticus 15:19, if a woman has an issue, and her issue in her flesh be blood, she shall be put apart for 7 days. So that flower there is the blood that comes out from a woman whenever she's in her period. That blood that comes out is the flower. That's why you go down all the way down to the chapter. It tells you that the law that we just read in Leviticus chapter 15, this law that we just read is a law that applies to men when their sperm or their seed comes out from them, or a blood comes out from them. And it's also, according to verse 33, it's also a law that applies to women when she is sick of her flower. So that word flower there is the blood. That's a blood. That blood that touches a man when a man has sex with a woman when she's in her period. That blood that touches him. That blood that comes out from her because she's on her period and then touches him. That blood is the flower. So our Heavenly Father, He likes to use agricultural language to describe things. He just likes to do that. And I will give you some examples. Our Heavenly Father likes to use agricultural language. He says to Abraham, your seed, I will make your seed great. You know that seed is like, the seed of an apple, the seed of an orange. Crops have seeds. But you see, our Heavenly Father, what I'm explaining right now will help you to understand why you see the word flower, blood being described as a flower. So our Heavenly Father has a pattern. There's a pattern in the scripture of our Heavenly Father using agricultural terms to describe things. The reason why is because we are agricultural people. We are no longer agricultural people. Right now, we depend on corporations to feed us. We depend on corporations to grow our food and feed us. But originally, Hebrew people are agricultural people. Okay, so our Heavenly Father says to Abraham, your seed, I will make your seed great. Your seed. He wasn't talking about apple seed or orange seed. He's talking about sperm. The sperm that will come out from Abraham and go into Sarah and turns into Isaac. So Isaac is Abraham's seed. Eventually became Jacob. And then the 12th tribe of Israel. That's the seed of Abraham. But you see him using an agricultural terms to describe that situation. You also see the example, not just Abraham, but with Onan that we read earlier today. Genesis chapter 38. We also see in Genesis 38 that Yehuda told this boy to go and marry or go and take your brother's wife and go in unto her so that you can raise up a seed. You can raise up a seed for your brother. You can raise up a seed for your brother. That's what we see in Genesis chapter 38. So it's not just with Abraham. Okay, so that's that. And then we have our Heavenly Father telling the Israelites, I will give you a land flowing with milk and honey. That's an agricultural term. A land flowing with milk and honey. Again, that's an agricultural term that you see our Heavenly Father using. And then you see him you see the Bible talking about the lamb. Christ being the lamb. That is an agricultural term. You see things like saying that the word of Yah is sweeter than honey. The word of Yah is sweeter than honey. That's an agricultural term. We also have Genesis chapter 29. Genesis 29 with Jacob and his wives. Genesis chapter 28, chapter 29, chapter 30. After he married his wives, they couldn't have babies. There was some issue with getting pregnant. And one of his wives told him, I will kill myself if I don't get pregnant. And Jacob was like, am I the Elohim that gives the fruit of the womb? That's Genesis. You can see it. You can go to Genesis chapter, and read it and see for yourself. So he asks her, am I the Elohim that gives the fruit of the womb? Am I the one that gives the fruit of the womb? So Genesis chapter 30, it says, and when Rachel saw that she bare Jacob no children, Rachel envied her sister and said unto Jacob, give me children or else I will die. Verse 2, and Jacob's anger was kindled against Rachel. And he said, am I in Elohim's stead, who had withheld from thee the fruit of the womb? The fruit of the womb. So Jacob was asking, this is what's going to help you to understand what Paul said in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 36. If you don't understand all of these things, you would not understand why Paul used that language. And frankly, Satan don't want you to understand it, because Satan wants to delay your children getting married as long as possible, so they can be sneaking out and having sex. So you have to understand this biblical way of speaking. Our people, we learn it from Yah. Yah is the one that started doing it. Yah uses agricultural languages. I'm going to give you a land flowing with milk and honey. Was that land, do we have a record of there being a river in Israel where there's a river of milk? No. We don't have. There is nothing like a river that flows with milk and honey. That is something we call proverb. Yah was speaking in proverbs. And only the wise will understand what he was saying. He doesn't mean that he will literally give you a land. When you get into that land, you're going to be able to take a bucket and go to the river and get some milk. That's not what he was saying. It doesn't mean that you will take a bucket and go to a river and get some honey. That's not what he was saying. But he was using an agricultural language, because we are we used to be agricultural people. And we have to get back to that mindset again, because then you won't go hungry. If you have to only depend on people to feed you, what do you do when there's a huge earthquake, a huge power outage? You're going to starve to death. You have to get back to the mindset of growing your own food, getting your own food. That's how Yah wants it to be. Right now, we are in total dependence on the Gentiles, and these people are feeding us with poison. So look at what Jacob told his wife in verse 2. Genesis chapter 30 verse 2. And Jacob's anger was kindled against Rachel, and he answered and he said, am I in Elohim's stead, who had withheld from thee the fruit of the womb? Remember that we read about flour in Leviticus chapter 15 at the very end. So the reason why I'm doing this is for you to see the reason why you see the word flour. Blood was being described as a flower. Here in Genesis chapter 30, Jacob, the father of the Israelites, is describing a baby as the fruit of the womb. Do women usually have fruits in their womb? Do women grow fruit in their womb? No. But it's simply describing a baby. He said that I'm not Elohim. Am I the Elohim that have made you not to produce the fruit of the womb? Genesis chapter 30 verse 2. Verse 3. And she said, behold, my maid Bilhah, go in unto her, and she shall bear upon my knees, that I may also have children by her. These are women who were selfless. They were not selfish. It was all about, how can we build this family? Today, this is impossible. Almost. I mean, it does happen. There are some people that do encourage their husband to go marry another wife, but it doesn't happen most of the time. So she said, basically, since I cannot have a child, here is my maid. Take my maid. So that when my maid becomes pregnant, if you marry my maid and my maid becomes pregnant, the child that my maid has will be my child. I'm going to have a child by her. Verse 4, and she gave him Bilhah, her handmaid, to wife, and Jacob went in unto her. And Bilhah conceived and bare Jacob a son. Verse 6, look at her reaction. Verse 6, and Rachel said, Elohim had judged me, and had also heard my voice, and had given me a son. Therefore called she his name Dan. What you see here is the 12th tribe of Israel in the making. This is how the 12th tribe of Israel was produced. So when her maid became pregnant and produced the fruit of the womb, a baby, this woman began to thank our Heavenly Father. She was not the one that carried the baby. This is not her biological baby. This is her maid's baby. But she was thanking Yah for giving her a son. So giving her maid a son, she considered that to be her own son. These are some of the ancient things that our ancestors want us to go back to. We can't pick and choose. This is clearly what our ancestors did. And it was preserved here according to 2 Timothy chapter 3 verse 16. 2 Timothy 3:16, all scriptures are given by the inspiration of Yah for our learning, for our reproof, for it's all for us to learn from. So she goes and begins to thank Yah for that. Verse 7, and Bilhah, Rachel's maid, conceived and bare Jacob a second son. Verse 8, and Rachel said, with great wrestling I have wrestled with my sister, and have prevailed. And she called his name Naphtali. The tribe of Naphtali came from this man. And it just goes on and on and on and on. But the reason why we came here is because of verse 2. Because in verse 2, Jacob says to her, am I Elohim that have withheld from you the fruit of the womb? So we have a history of using agricultural language. I'm going to see if some more will come, if some more examples will come. So we have this. We see Yeshua being described as a lamb. A lamb. These are all agricultural terms. So when you go back to Leviticus chapter 15, and it says something about the flour, call them a blood flour. This is what it means. So Leviticus chapter, let's go back to Leviticus chapter 15. So it says that this law, Leviticus chapter 15 verse 32, this is the law of him that had an issue, and of him whose seed goeth out from him, and is defiled therein. Verse 33, and of her that is sick of her flour, and of her that is sick of her flowers, and of him that had an issue. So that word flour there is blood, because he tells you in verse 24 that if a man lie with her at all, and her flowers be upon him, he shall be unclean for 7 days. That flower there that may touch the man is the blood, because when a woman is seeing her period, if a man touches her sexually, that blood is going to touch him, and that blood is described as a flower. So now, if we now go to 1 Corinthians chapter 7, If we go to 1 Corinthians chapter 7, we've done this before, and I showed you a lot. I showed you some videos and some stuff, how, crops grow and stuff like that. We did this more than 1 year ago. So when you go to 1 Corinthians chapter 7, 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 36, Paul says, "But if any man thinks that he behaved himself uncomely towards his virgin, if she pass the flower of her age, and need so require, let him do what he will. He sinneth not, let them marry." If a man thinks that he is behaving uncomely, don't forget that 1 Corinthians chapter 7 is talking all about marriage. The whole chapter is dealing with marriage, with this issue of marriage. So, because it says in verse 1, "Now concerning the things wherefore ye wrote unto me, is it good for a man not to touch a woman?" Verse 2, "Nevertheless, to avoid fornication, let every man have his own wife, and let every woman have her own husband." So that's what this chapter is talking about. That's the context of the chapter. In verse 36, he goes on to say that if a man thinks that he's behaving uncomely towards his virgin, you see, as a Christian, that doesn't make any sense. Why does he say if a man thinks that he's behaving uncomely, improperly, basically, towards his virgin, like basically lusting after his virgin? But first of all, does men usually have virgins? Do you see men today that have virgins? That doesn't happen. Nobody owns anybody. You don't have virgins. So that particular verse today does not make any sense. And Gentiles will never understand it, because it says, if any man thinks that he's behaving uncomely towards his virgin. I told you that I love to collect Bible translations. I love to buy different Bible translations, and I have so many Bible translations. So I have even seen some Bible translations. This is one of the places that I look at in Bible when I get a new translation. Many of them are nonsense. Many of these translations are a bunch of nonsense. Many of them are complete garbage. I have even seen a translation. I can't remember the translation, but I've seen a translation that actually describes this verse as, if a man thinks that he's not handling his own virginity right, let him marry. Some translation translate it that way, which is ridiculous, because it tells you if a man thinks that he's behaving uncomely towards his own virgin, if she has passed the flower of her age. So if you look at that verse right there, that could not be talking about the man, because it says that if she has passed the flower. So, but there are some translation that will translate it saying that if a man thinks that he's not kind of condoning himself right, let him marry. So they leave out the part that says if she has found, So the big question is, what does it mean when it says that if a man thinks that he's behaving uncomely towards his virgin? Because we know today that people don't own virgins. Now, if a girl is betrothed to you, then you own a virgin. That is the only way that it makes any sense. So, example, Joseph, because Mary was betrothed to him, so Mary belongs to him. He owns a virgin. But today, people no longer do that. People will basically meet each other. They tell each other that they love each other, and then they start having sex. People no longer. So a girl that is betrothed to a man, that man is the owner of that virgin. That man is the owner of that virgin. And this is the reason why we're going to have to go back to Deuteronomy chapter 22. So let's go to Deuteronomy chapter 22 and see And you can see again what Yah says about a man owning the girl. Deuteronomy chapter 22. Let's start from verse 23. Deuteronomy 22:23. Deuteronomy chapter 22 verse 23. If a damsel that is a virgin be betrothed unto an husband, and a man finds her in the city and lie with her, then ye shall bring them both into the gate of that city, and ye shall stone them with stones, that they die. The damsel, because she cried not, she being in the city, and the man, because he had humbled his neighbor's wife. So thou shalt put away evil from among you. Verse 25. But if a man finds a betrothed damsel in the field, and the man force her and lie with her, then the man only that lay with her shall die. So this verse 25 here condemns these people that tell you that the Bible condones rape. The Bible does not condone rape. Look at verse 25. Deuteronomy chapter 22 verse 25. If a man finds a betrothed damsel in the field, and the man force her and lie with her, then the man only that lay with her shall die. Verse 26. But unto the damsel thou shalt do nothing. There is in the damsel no sin worthy of death. For as a man riseth against his neighbor and slayeth him, even so this matter. Verse 27. For he found her in the field, and the betrothed damsel cried, and there was none to save her. So it doesn't matter where if you force a girl and have sex with a girl by force, that is rape. That's the point that Yah is making. That is rape. You force a girl and rape a girl, you are supposed to die. You are the one that will die. And men need to be careful. Men need to be careful. Because I'm going to tell you right now, if you rape a girl that is a virgin, if a man, typically you're supposed to be killed by the community. But because we're living in a wicked world where people don't care about Yah's law, if you rape a young girl, you are endangering your own life, because somebody may decide to take it upon themselves and kill you. Yah is not going to have any pity on you, because you committed a sin worthy of death. So men need to be very careful. Do not rape a woman. Do not rape a girl. You can get yourself killed if you rape a girl. Do not do that, because you're going to put yourself in the situation that the Shechemites put themselves. They raped Dinah. They took Dinah and had sex with her without consulting her parents. If you have a girl that you want to marry, you have to talk to the parents. You have to get the concept of the parents. If they say yes, then you go ahead and marry their daughter. If they say no, stay away from her. Stay away. If you think you're smart and then you go behind the parents and have sex with their daughter, anybody in that family can come after you. If they don't really want you to marry their daughter, if they're not keeping the law the way they're supposed to, they can come after you and they can kill you. They can kill you. Yah will not have any mercy on you. Yah will not pity you, because that is the only way, as long as you are alive. their daughter is stuck with you, biblically. See what happened in Jubilees chapter 30 with Dinah and the Shechemite. So because he raped Dinah, he was supposed to go to Jacob first, like you see in Genesis 24 with Rebekah and being married for Isaac, Rebekah. So he didn't, this Shechemite, the Gentile, he didn't go and talk to Jacob, the father of Dinah. He went from behind him and went and have sex with her. So don't think that you're smart and you're intelligent and you go behind a parent and go have sex with their daughter. That is an unwise thing to do. If they kill you, Yah is going to hold them responsible. Yah will punish them for killing you because they did not do it the right way. It wasn't done the right way because Yah does not want us to become, to take the law into our hand. There are processes to which you have to go through to kill somebody that break the law. There has to be at least 2 or 3 witnesses. At least 2 or 3 witnesses. And then the people of the land are the ones that will stone that man or stone that woman. So you don't take the law into your hand and go out there to go avenge for yourself. You don't do that. If you do that, Yah will punish you. There are processes that has to be done, you have to go through before somebody will be put to death. If you go by yourself and go kill a man, Yah will hold. Yes, Yah may not be happy with that man. Maybe that man killed your family member. Maybe that man stole from you. Maybe whatever reason why. Yah is not going to be happy with that man because he broke a law. But Yah will also not be happy with you because you killed that man the wrong way. There's a process that you have to go through. Okay? You have to take it to the elders and told them what the man did. And it's the people of the land that is supposed to kill that man. Now, if the people of the land are not able to do it, then leave everything in the hands of Yah. Because the people of the land don't want to do it, doesn't mean that you should go and do it yourself. You have to leave everything in the hands of Yah. And I will tell you, if the people of the land did not do it, look at what happened to Abigail's husband, Abigail. So when she got married to a wicked man, and her husband was a rich man. He was rich, but he was a wicked man. And this woman was a very nice woman. And she feared Yah. But unfortunately, she was stuck with this wicked man. It was Yah himself that killed that man. Because the Most High will not, if you are a very humble woman and you're playing your part as a wife, you're doing what you're supposed to do, you're not being rebellious, you're submissive, you're humble. This is Abigail. Go read 1 Samuel chapter 25. Go read 1 Samuel chapter 25. She was a very humble woman, a true Hebrew woman, humble. But she was stuck with a Hebrew man that was wicked. He was wicked. He was very wicked. He was so wicked that at some point David wanted to kill him. And she came and started begging. Abigail, was begging David, please not to kill him. So even though he was a wicked man, some women would have kept quiet. and allowed David to kill him. And that wicked man did not even know that he did not even know that David wanted to kill him. Go and read 1 Samuel chapter 25. 1 Samuel 25. 1 Samuel. The book of 1 Samuel chapter 25. That's where you will read this. So Nabal did not even know that David was coming. Some women would have just kept quiet because she will want to get out of that marriage, because she was stuck in that marriage because of the law. But even though, he was a wicked man, she was still a righteous woman. She did not want him dead. Yes, he was wicked, but she was still humble. She was still submissive. And she went behind the scene. She went behind the scene to plead with David to not kill her husband. So Yah was watching the whole thing. The Most High was watching it. It was Yah that decided to strike down Nabal. 10 days later, he died. He became sick. 10 days later, he died. So you see how Yah came and rescued that woman from the hand of the wicked man that she was married to. 10 days later, Nabal was dead. And then after that, David sent a message to Abigail, asking her if she would like to be his wife. And she said yes. And that's how David ended up marrying her. So as we are in this journey traveling, and do not take the law into your hand. Don't try to poison anybody. Don't try to kill anybody. No matter what they do, leave everything in the hands of Yah. If you are honest, if you are truthful, if you were innocent, leave everything in the hands of Yah. Yah will fight for you. And there is nobody can fight for you better than the way that Yah will fight for you. Just fold your hands and watch. So don't take the law into your hand, because the law said that when someone does this, they should die. And then you go try to take it into your hand. No, there's a process. You have to have at least 1 to 2 to 3 witnesses. And then the case will usually go out to the elders. And then the elders are the ones that will look at the case and then decide. And then that person will be killed by the public, not just one person. If you look at the law on this, it says that the person that saw that person, the witness, will be the first to cast the first stone. Then the rest of the people will join in. So if somebody hurts you, somebody does something worthy of death, leave it in the hands of Yah. Leave it in the hands of Yah, and Yah will fight for you. The Most High will fight for you. So going back to 1 Corinthians, you see that we have, now you can understand why Paul said, if a man thinks that if a man thinks that he is behaving uncalmly towards his virgin, because typically that's why you keep hearing about your sons, because your son is supposed to have a girl betrothed to him. So today that verse will not make any sense, but when you understand the Hebrew culture, then you understand that men typically have girls betrothed to them. And that's what you see in the Islamic countries. In Arab country, girls get married at a very young age. Once a girl sees her period, it's almost like it's dangerous for her not to get married, because anything can happen at any time. Somebody can rape her, or somebody can seduce her and steal her virginity. So typically, as soon as she sees her virginity, she gets married. That's how it's done, according to the Hebrew culture. And you see what's going on in the Arab world. They still do the same. So in the Arab world, most women get married actually the right way. That's the way it's done. So, and they do it, and in the evening of their wedding, they consummate the marriage. So that's what Paul was talking about. So you now understand what it means that if she has seen the flower of her youth, let them marry. If a woman, if a man thinks like he's behaving uncomely towards his virgin, but if any man thinks that he behaved himself uncomely towards his virgin, if she pass the flower of her age and need require, of course need is required because now he's feeling horny, so need so require, let him do what he will, he sinneth not, let them marry. So the part that says if she pass the flower of her age, that flower is that blood that comes out when a woman sees her period. So when a girl have not seen that flower, that blood, she hasn't passed it yet. So it will be unbiblical or a wicked thing to touch a girl sexually, to have sex with a girl that have not seen that flower. But if a girl sees that flower, then she's not ready. That's the reason why when you touch her sexually, she becomes pregnant. But before she sees her flower, if you touch her, that is not, because she's not ready. She hasn't seen her flower yet. It doesn't matter whether she's 15 years old, you cannot touch her. If she's 17 years old and she hasn't seen her period, you don't touch her. She's not ready for marriage. If she's 18 years old and she hasn't seen her period, she's not ready for marriage. If she's 12 years old and she has seen her period, she's ready for marriage. This is how it works. So now, going back to clean and unclean, we've seen the law that Yah gave us about clean and unclean in Leviticus chapter 15. So if we remember what we read earlier in Numbers chapter 19, it describes the cleansing process with the water that needs to be used and stuff like that. Because we don't have the temple anymore, and the priests have been scattered in the four corners of the earth, and the tabernacle has been destroyed, the house of Yah was destroyed, and we're scattered in the four corners of the earth. What we now need to do is that we still need to acknowledge that we are unclean. Because if you remember in that Numbers chapter 19, the law that Yah gave us there about clean and unclean was forever. It was the perpetual covenant, a perpetual statute, or perpetual ordinance. The law that the Most High gave us in Numbers chapter 19 about clean and unclean was forever. And he knew that we were going to be going into captivity. So that law is forever. So it doesn't matter where we are. So when we get unclean, whether you are a man or a woman, you simply acknowledge that you are unclean. If you touch a dead body, if you touch a bone, if you touch a grave, you touch a dead animal that died of itself, you simply go home. Actually, there are two types of uncleanliness. So when you touch like pork, you are unclean until evening. If you touch shrimp, you are unclean until evening. If you touch a woman, physically, if you touch a woman who is in her period, you are unclean until evening. If you touch a seat where a woman who is on her period touch it, you are unclean until evening. Right now, I hate using public bathrooms. So I only look for the ones for men. I only try to use the one, if I have to use the public bathroom, I only use the one for men. Do not use the one for women, because if you sit down on that sink, you are unclean. On that toilet seat, you are unclean. So try to use the one for men. If you have to use a public bathroom, use the one that is designed for men. Because the one that is designed for women, that's a public toilet. Women who are unclean are eventually going to be using that on a daily basis, because they don't know that they are unclean. I mean, they are, but they don't know who they are. So there are two types of uncleanliness. If you touch somebody who is unclean, if you touch a dead animal, if you touch like shrimp or pork, if a sperm comes out from your body, you are all unclean until evening. These are all until evening. If you touch a dead body, you are unclean for 7 days. If you touch a grave, you are unclean for 7 days. If you touch a bone of a dead person, you are unclean for 7 days. If you are in a room and somebody dies, you are unclean for 7 days. And all this is found in Numbers chapter 19. Numbers chapter 19. So if you are a woman and you are in your period, you are unclean for 7 days. After 7 days, you're fine. Sometimes, most of the time, your period will start coming out after 4 or 5 days, but you're still unclean for 7 days. So what we do, this law still apply to us till today. What do we read in 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 17 and 18? 2 Corinthians chapter 17 and 18. 2 Corinthians chapter 6. 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 17 and 18. It says, come out from among them. Come out from among them and be ye separate. Touch nothing unclean, and I will receive it to myself. I will be a father to you, and you will be sons and daughters to me. So it still applies to us till this day. And again, if you read Numbers chapter 19, that law that was given there applies to us forever. Forever. The law about clean and unclean. So today, this is not really a big deal. When you are unclean, if you are on your period, you're simply unclean for 7 days. Do not touch the Bible. Don't touch the scriptures because of Leviticus chapter 12. Leviticus chapter 12. If you give birth to a child, you are unclean. If you give birth to a child. So Leviticus chapter 12, we have to also cover that. Leviticus chapter 12. It says this. Leviticus chapter 12. And Yah spoke unto Moshe, saying, speak unto the children of Israel, saying, if a woman had conceived seed and bore man-child, then she shall be unclean 7 days, according to the days of her separation, for her infirmity shall she be unclean. So if a woman gives birth to a child, to a boy, she shall be unclean for 7 days, just like she is when she's in her period. So 7 days, this is the reason why when people give birth, like people that I know, when they have a baby, I don't go until after, way after. Because I know that 7 days, for that 7 days, I want to know what is it, a boy or a girl? I usually want to know, is that a boy or a girl? If it's a boy, then I cannot visit them until after 1 week, because she's unclean, just like she's in her period. So it says in verse 2, or actually verse 3, and in the 8th day the flesh of his foreskin shall be circumcised. That for that son, for that boy. So that woman is unclean. Whenever a woman gives birth to a child, to a boy, she is unclean for 7 days, just like she is in her period. Verse 4, and she shall then continue in the blood of her purifying 33 days. 33 days. So 33 days. She shall touch no hallowed thing, nor come into the sanctuary until the days of her purifying. So when a woman gives birth to a son, she's unclean as in the way she is in her monthly period for 7 days. But she also will continue to be unclean, but not like on her monthly. After 7 days, then her uncleanness will go into like regular uncleanliness. So after 7 days, when a woman gives birth to a child, if you touch anything that she touches, you're unclean. She's unclean just like in her monthly period. So anything that she touches, you're unclean. You touch her bed, you're unclean. So if you are a man and your wife gives birth to a child, you're guaranteed to be unclean for 7 days. Guaranteed. Because she, the wife that gave birth to a son, she's unclean just like she is on her monthly period. So anything that she touches, anything she touches, you touch it, you're unclean until evening. So as a man, you're going to be pretty much taking shower every day, every evening before the sun goes down, every evening before the sun goes down, until after 1 week. So after 1 week, she's no longer unclean, as in her monthly period, but she's still unclean, but not as in her monthly period. So at that point, if you touch her, you're not unclean. You're not unclean. The only reason why you are is because she's unclean as in her monthly period. The only reason why you will be is because she will be unclean as in her monthly period. So, verse 4, Leviticus chapter 12, verse 4. And she shall then continue in the blood of her purifying 33 days. 33 days. She shall touch no hallowed thing, nor come into the sanctuary until the days of her purifying be fulfilled. So, after 7 days, after she gave birth to a son, after 7 days, she is no longer unclean as in her monthly period. She is more of like unclean as in her touching a pork or shrimp. So her uncleanness is no longer contaminated. When she's unclean for 7 days because of her monthly period or because she gave birth to a son, when she's unclean like that, it's contaminating. So if you touch anything that she touches, you are unclean. But after 7 days, she's no longer unclean like that. She's now only unclean as in when she touches like a dead animal or pork or shrimp or whatever. So that does no longer communicate. She's unclean still, but it's no longer contagious. So it says, but she still cannot touch anything that is holy because she's still unclean for 33 days. 33 days. If the birth that she gave to was a son, if it's a son. Verse 5, Leviticus chapter 12, verse 5. But if she bear a maid child, a girl, then she shall be unclean 2 weeks, as in her separation, and she shall continue in the blood of her purifying 66 days. So now it's going to go from 33 days for a boy. If she gives birth to a girl, it's much longer. So for 2 weeks, if she gives birth to a girl, for 2 weeks, she will be unclean as in her monthly period. Just like she is in her monthly period, that's how she will be unclean if she gives birth to a girl. So for a boy, she's unclean as in her monthly period for 1 week. If she gives birth to a girl, she's unclean for 2 weeks, just like she will be in her monthly period. So for 2 weeks, if you touch her bed, if you touch anything that she touches, you are unclean. And then after that 2 weeks, for 66 days, she will still be unclean, but not as in her monthly period. So at that point, her uncleanness is no longer contaminating at that point. And then he goes on to say, Uh, Verse 6, when the days of her purifying are fulfilled, for a son or for a daughter, she shall bring a lamb of the first year for a burnt offering, and a young pigeon or a turtle dove for a sin offering unto the door of the tabernacle of the congregation, unto the priest. Verse 7, who shall offer it before Yah, and make atonement for her, and she shall be cleansed from the issue of her blood. This is the law for her that had borne a male or a female. Verse 8, and if she be not able to bring a lamb, then she shall bring 2 turtles, or 2 young pigeons, meaning turtle doves, or 2 young pigeons, the one for the burnt offering and the other for a sin offering. And the priest shall make atonement for her, and she shall be cleaned. So, this is for when a woman has a baby. So this is what we have, and what we have to do today is just acknowledge that we are unclean. When you give birth to a child, you don't have the temple, you don't have the sanctuary anymore, because it was destroyed in 70 AD. We don't have the priests because they've been scattered in the 4 corners of the earth. But you still have to conduct yourself. You still have to acknowledge that you are unclean. You don't touch anything that is holy. You stay away from the Yah sanctuary. You stay away from praying because you are unclean, and you don't want to approach the Most High when you are unclean. Okay, this is the reason why we have to also look at that is the scripture that I talked about in Exodus chapter 19. Exodus 19. Let's see what Yah says about approaching him. Exodus 19. So Exodus chapter 19 from verse 10. Exodus 19 from verse 10. And Yah said unto Moshe, go unto the people and sanctify them today and tomorrow, and let them wash their clothes, and be ready against the 3rd day. For the 3rd day Yah will come down in the sight of all the people upon Mount Sinai, and thou shalt set bound unto the people around, saying, take heed to yourself that ye go not up unto the mountain, and touch not the border of it. Whosoever toucheth the mountain shall surely be put to death. Verse 13. There shall not an hand touch it, but he shall surely be stoned or shoot through, whether it be a beast or a man. It shall not live. When the trumpet sounded long, they shall come up to the mountain. Verse 14, Exodus chapter 19, verse 14. Moshe went down from the mount unto the people, and sanctified the people, and they washed their clothes, and said unto the people, be ready against the 3rd day. Come not at your wives. So what do you see them doing before they approach Yah? What do they do? What were they told to do? Wash your clothes. You have to approach with a clean cloth. Wash your clothes. And do not touch your wives. Because according to Leviticus chapter 19, when you touch your wife, you are unclean until evening. So he said to them, verse 15, and he said unto them, be ready against the 3rd day. Come not at your wives. Verse 16, and it came to pass on the 3rd day in the morning that there were thunders and lightning and a thick cloud upon the mount, and the voice of the trumpet exceedingly loud. So all the people that was in the camp trembled. So we see here they were told, before you approach Yah, wash your clothes. Do not have sex with your wives, before you approach. So we also see in Leviticus chapter 12. Leviticus 12. I read the whole chapter. It says that a woman, you don't touch anything that is holy, and you don't enter into the Yah's sanctuary. You don't go into the sanctuary of Yah. So for us, men, women, even the priests will, for all of us, when we are unclean, it's very important to stay away from the things of Yah. It's important to stay away and simply acknowledge that we are unclean. Yes, we don't have the temple right now. Yes, we don't have the priest, but Yeshua will return these things when he gets back. When Yeshua returns back, he will restore all of these things. He will restore them. So this is very, very important because it's extremely important. It's very important that we observe these things because our Heavenly Father said so. We cannot have the attitude that it doesn't matter, like you had last night. If you listen to the live broadcast that I did, you see people saying stuff like, that we're in captivity. That is absolute nonsense because we got in trouble because of our uncleanliness and our lawlessness. So how can we continue in lawlessness that grace may abound? No. So this is not too difficult to observe today. It's not too difficult. Simply when you get unclean, just wash yourself and be unclean until evening. Find out the kind of uncleanness that you are. If a woman is unclean and you happen to touch her bed or touch anything that she touched, then you are unclean until evening. She is unclean for 7 days. You are unclean until evening. That's the way it is. If you touch a dead animal, you are unclean until evening. If you touch a dead body, you are unclean for 7 days, just like a woman who is in her period. This is not complicated. This is not difficult. This is very easy. Very, very easy. And this is the will of Yah. We must acknowledge and accept these things if we want to make it into the kingdom. This is one of the things that sets us apart. It's actually really, really interesting. It's actually really good because these are the things that set you apart. The fact that you're observing and acknowledge these things. So when we get unclean, let us acknowledge that we are unclean. Let us wash ourselves until evening. What else do I want to add here? So a question that I think some people may have is this. The question is this. When a woman is in her period, does she take shower every day? Well, you're unclean for 7 days. So you could go into a shower and shower. When you come out, you are still unclean. So your unclean is for 7 days. So whenever you are on your period, you are unclean for 7 days. Is it good to take shower every day? I think that would be a good idea because you have blood coming out from you. So it would be a good idea to take shower every day. Must you take shower every day? No. No, if you are on your period. When you're on your period, you are unclean for 7 days. So if you do take shower every day, that's a good thing. To keep yourself clean, that's good. But you don't have to. So don't be in a rush that, I have to go home so I can go take shower. Don't be like that. When you are on your period for 7 days, it's for 7 days. It's good to take shower every day, that's fine. If you have someone in the house that lives with you, then they are the ones who are going to be taking shower every evening because so if you're a woman and you're unclean for 7 days, the person that lives with you in the house is the one that takes shower every day. If you are a woman and you live in a house and there's another woman in that house who is unclean. There's another woman in the house who is unclean. So it doesn't matter whether you're a woman or not. If you live with someone in the house, if you live in the house, um, if you live in the house with someone and they are in their period, then they don't have to take shower every day because they are unclean until 7 days. But you that live with them will be taking shower every day, every day. So every day, you're supposed to. And when we are unclean, why would you want to pray? We stay away from the things of Yah. According to Leviticus chapter 12 that I read earlier, Leviticus chapter 12 that I read, we see that when you are unclean, you don't go into the house of Yah. You don't touch anything that is holy. You don't go into his house, you don't touch anything that is holy. What do you go into his house to do? To pray. So we don't approach, Yah is holy. Yah is holy. We do not approach Yah when we are unclean. Don't do that. Whatever it is that you want to pray for, he knows what's in your heart. He knows what you need, and he knows what's in your heart. So you don't approach him when you are unclean. If you look at Exodus chapter 19 that I read, Exodus chapter 19 from verse 10 to 16, Exodus chapter 19, you see that before we could approach Yah, Yah told Moshe to go prepare us. It was part of the preparation was that we have to wash our clothes. After today, I'm going to take this off. I wear this on the Sabbath. I'm going to take it off and I'm going to wash it. And I'll keep it until the next Sabbath. That's how I like to do it. So you have to wash your clothes before you approach Yah. You have to be clean. Wash yourself also. Wash yourself also. So before you approach Yah, the Muslims, the Arabs do this a lot. The Arabs do this a lot. They are, if you know them, the Arabs, for those of you who know Arabs in Africa, they are clean freak. They are freaks when it comes to being clean. They carry around a little jug with water, and they wash themselves. They wash their face, they wash their hands, they wash their private part. They are clean freak. They always want to make sure that they are clean. The Arabs. So this is something that if you grow up in Africa, you will know that the Muslims do this. They are clean freak. They have that jug. They carry it, and they have to they wash their private part. They wash their feet. They just wash themselves. So that did not make sense to us until we begin to realize their link to the scripture. So, but again, don't forget Exodus chapter 19. See the process that we had to go through before we could meet Yah. So this is not Christianity, where you go to club on Friday night or Saturday night. You go to club, you follow somebody home and you go have sex with them. Then you go back early in the morning and get ready and shower and get ready and take your Bible and go to church. No, this is not that. So with Yah, when it comes to the real worship of Yah, there are protocols. And these rules and regulations are what sets us apart. Because most people will not do this. This is what sets us apart. This is what proves whether or not you are a child of Yah. These things are what sets us apart, and it's not difficult to observe. This is easy. It's not that difficult. Once you get used to it, it becomes part of your life. So this is what we have when it comes to clean and unclean. And that's what we have when it comes to clean and unclean. And again, do not buy the idea that we are living in the land of our captivity. So therefore, because we live in the land of our captivity, that it doesn't apply to us. That's not true. Look at Numbers chapter 19. The law that the Most High gave you about clean and unclean was forever. That's what he says in Numbers chapter 19. So it doesn't matter where we are. That law applies to us forever in all our dwellings. And all we have to do is when we are unclean, we simply acknowledge, oh, I'm unclean. Then, you stay away from holy things. It's not complicated. It's not difficult. It is not. It's very simple. So I thank our Heavenly Father for everything. I give Yah all the glory and all the honor for opening our eyes and teaching us these things to understand these things. I love it. I love this. I love these things because this is what sets us apart. Anybody can claim that they know God. Anybody can claim that they believe in God. These laws are what sets us apart. It's wonderful. It's good. And it's amazing. So, like as I said yesterday, you don't even have to say anything to anybody. You don't have to tell them that you are this or you're that. They can look at your lifestyle and they will see that, wow, this person is truly following the word of God. That's what they will think. But you don't have to say it. You don't have to tell people that you're a Hebrew, you're this, or you can tell them if you want to. If they ask you, why are you doing this? The best thing to answer is that you are a Hebrew. I am a Hebrew Israelite. I'm simply following the laws and the commandment that our Heavenly Father gave us. We have been scattered in the four corners of the earth and we are in captivity today because we did not follow the law. That is the reason why I'm following the law, because Christ told us to follow the law. Christ told us that we have to follow the law. So these are the things that sets us apart. And all we have to do, don't worry about that water that the priest is supposed to use to sprinkle you, because the temple has been destroyed, the priest has been scattered, but we are still supposed to acknowledge when we are unclean. So we cannot pray to our Heavenly Father just because, no, we don't pray. When we are unclean, we are unclean. We just have to do what we need to do, be unclean until evening. If you touched an animal or you touch somebody that is on their period, if you are on your period, then you're unclean for 7 days. Like as I said, you don't have to take bath every day. If you want to take bath every day, that's fine. But you don't have to. But if somebody lives with you in their house, then they have to take their bath every day in the evening before the sun goes down. They take their bath every day before the sun goes down. What else? I want to make sure I add everything because this information somebody might, I want to make sure that I add all the questions. So when you're on your period, you're unclean for 7 days. You don't have to take bath every day, but it's recommended because you got blood coming out from your body, so it's recommended. If you have children or your husband who lives with you, then they have to take their bath every day before the sun goes down because they are constantly being contaminated by that uncleanliness. If I may use the word contaminated, they are constantly being, affected by that uncleanliness. So they take their bath before the sun goes down. I'm going to go back real quick to Leviticus chapter because there was something that I wanted to say, but I don't want to say it I want to make sure I say it correctly. So Leviticus chapter 15, because this may also be a challenge or, for you. Okay, so let's get down to Leviticus chapter from verse 21. Look at verse 21. So I'm about to address those that live with people who may see their period. So for your children or your husband or whoever is in the house, this is for them. So it says in verse 21, and whosoever toucheth her bed shall wash his clothes and bathe himself in water and be unclean until evening. Verse 22, Leviticus 15:22, and whosoever verse 22 or verse 20. Actually, let me go back to verse 19 and start from the beginning where it deals with the women so we can cover it completely. So it says in verse 19, and if a woman had an issue, and her issue in her flesh be blood, she shall be put apart 7 days, and whosoever toucheth her shall be unclean until evening. Verse 20, and everything that she lieth upon, like her bed, in her separation shall be unclean. Everything also that she sitteth upon, like her chairs, shall be unclean. Verse 21, and whosoever toucheth her bed shall wash his clothes and bathe himself in water and be unclean until evening. Verse 22, and whosoever toucheth anything that she sat upon shall wash his clothes and bathe himself in water and be unclean until evening. Verse 23, and if it be on her bed or on anything wherein she sitteth, wherein he touched, he shall be unclean until evening. So for those that live with you in the house, if a woman is on her period, like if my wife is unclean, then every evening, maybe 1 hour or 30 minutes before the sun goes down, I'm going to take my shower. I will take my shower, and so the best thing, what I advise people to do, the best thing for you to do, or what I do, is to simply go to the bathroom, because you're most likely wearing clothes that is actually physically clean. Most likely your clothes are clean. So to make this thing easy for you, the best thing to do is to go to, when it's time for you to take a shower, just go there, take off your clothes. I would take it off while I'm in the shower. I'll take, you take it off and you put it on the floor. You put it on the bath, and then you wash it. Use that soap that you're going to use to wash yourself, and wash it real quick. That cloth has no dirt on it. That cloth is simply spiritually dirty. So just wash it real quick right there while you're there. Or the best thing to do also, I try to wash myself first. So I take off the clothes and I put it on the ground. So while I'm washing myself, the cloth is getting wet. I'll wash myself, and then I'll wash the clothes. So when I'll use the same soap that I used to wash myself, and just put it on the cloth and just wash it real quick. Wash it and squeeze out the waters, squeeze out the water, and put the clothes away. And then pour some more water on myself, and then get out, and then put on another clothes. So in that way, it just saves a lot of time, and it just makes it easy. I'll put on another cloth. So that's the best way to do it. And in that way you don't keep on piling clothes, because you have to also wash that clothes the same day. Once you wash it and you wash yourself, you're good to go. So if you live in a house with a girl who sees her period, or a woman that sees her period, then for that 7 days you are unclean. If you touch anything that they touch, if you're not around them and you're not touching the stuff that they're touching, then you're fine. If you touch their bed, if you touch their chair, if you use the same bathroom, you are unclean. So that's the law about clean and unclean. Let's see. I thank our Heavenly Father for everything, for his I thank our Heavenly Father for his love and his kindness, for making us to understand these things. And these things are not really a burden. Actually, it's not. It is not a burden. These are part of what it means to be a Hebrew, So, and it applies to men and also to women. So what we covered today is about clean and unclean between men and women. Let me see. No. All right, so I give our Heavenly Father all the glory and all the honor. I thank you for everything. This is something that is very important, and I know that this information will definitely, some people may be very interested in, and maybe you are new to, this, and you're hearing, we have to keep the law, we have to keep the law, we have to keep the law, but you're not aware or familiar with the laws about clean and unclean. And I really hope that this have covered it, even though we went into other subjects, but that relates to this in a way. But I give you all the glory and all the honor. I thank our Heavenly Father for everything. And like I always say, if you do have any question about any of this, feel free to let me know. You're more than welcome to ask your question. To let me know. You can contact me. If you have any question, you can send me a message and contact me. For those that do have any question about any of this. So I thank our Heavenly Father for everything, and I hope that we will accept these laws of clean and unclean. I hope that we will accept it. This is not a big deal. This is very simple. When you are unclean, don't worry about the fact that we don't have the temple. Don't worry about the fact that we don't have the priest. Don't worry about the fact that we are scattered in the four corners of the earth. Yes, Yah knows that all those things will happen. And yet, in Numbers chapter 19, he told us that law about clean and unclean is forever. It's a perpetual ordinance. Perpetual ordinance. It's a perpetual law. So he knew that we're going to be scattered. He knew that at some point, he told us that he will send people to destroy the temple, and that he will scatter us in the four corners of the earth. He knew those things. So all we have to do today is now, when we are unclean, to acknowledge that we are unclean. To not pray when you are unclean. Don't pray when you are unclean. Don't go into the sanctuary of Yah when you are unclean. Don't touch anything that is holy. The Most High still knows what's in your heart. He knows that. So your prayer will not be rejected just because you are unclean. No, actually, when you acknowledge that you are unclean and do what you're supposed to do, that will be counted for you as a blessing. Praying in that situation is not a righteous thing to do. Yah knows what's in your heart. When you are obedient and you accept it and you acknowledge that, then that's good. So I thank our Heavenly Father for everything. I give Yah all the glory and all the honor. Like as I said, those that do have questions, you're more than welcome to contact me. If you have any question about this clean and unclean and things like this, I hope that and pray that Yah will strengthen you and give you, that you will also help yourself by, taking these laws seriously and not just be waiting for Yah to come and strengthen you. We have to move forward, and when Yah sees that we're being serious, then he will give us strength to keep on going. But we have to take the first step first. We have to make the first move.